About 9 o'clock in the morning, and under the cover of some high clouds, I left my home and started heading for the southeastern corner of the state of Oregon. I would head roughly southeast from the very center of the state to get to the area where I was going. It would take me about 6.5 hours on pavement to get to the point where I would hit the gravel. Over the course of that 6.5 hours of driving, I would really only pass through one other town of any kind of consequence. That town would be Burns, Oregon. I would pass through a handful of small little one-horse towns that if you blinked you'd miss. Places like Riley, Hampton, and French Glen. The last of these little one-horse towns that I would come across would be a place called Fields, Oregon. In Fields, Oregon, there's a little roadside stop called Field Station. That's the place where I would gas up, have my last human contact, and stock up on supplies for the rest of my trip. If you're ever in Fields, Oregon, I highly recommend grabbing one of the milkshakes from the Field Station. And for me, it's always a great last taste of civilization before I hit the dusty trails for a few days. After leaving Fields, I hit my last little stretch of pavement before I would hit the dirt, and I wouldn't see pavement again for at least 4 more days. How's it going, guys? Casey here with the Coyote Works channel. Well, I am off on another adventure. I just left the pavement. I am once again in one of the most remote parts of the state. I'm actually following this creek drainage up, and there's just a little bit of private land right along this creek here. Of course, it's one of the few water sources out in this entire area out here. So it would have been claimed as private land back in the homestead era, and it would have been one of the few little slivers of land out here that somebody could have probably raised enough cattle, had enough hay to feed their cattle through the winter, and actually made a viable little ranch out of. But I'm headed for an extremely remote little dry lake. Maybe there'll be a little water in it. Most of the time it's dry. And I went past it one time about midnight, something like 12 or 13 years ago, and I've always had it on my list to get back to. I'm gonna do some usual camp cooking, camp setup, hopefully show you guys a lot of this country, because this is one of the last great frontiers of the West out here where I am on this trip. And what in the hell is that? Hang on, I gotta check something out. This is a trip I've been thinking about all winter long, so I'm going to be all in on road and in country, virtually all of it that I've never seen before. So that's always one of my favorite kinds of trips, is when I'm seeing new trail, new hillsides, new terrain, and I'm just really liking the looks of this country. Right now I'm winding my way up through this canyon. Really cool little rock formations in here. Nice, actually, creek. Nice amount of water running down this thing. So in just a couple of miles up here, we're going to find our first little spot that I had marked on the map to check out. And basically all the mark on the map shows is some old ruins there. And I couldn't find any information yet as to what they might have been, but we're gonna go see if we can find it, number one, and if we can find it, we'll see if we can figure out what was going on there. Now, the little track that I'm taking to get me up close to it, there hasn't been any traffic on this year for sure, and it looks like very little traffic in recent times at all. So this could be one of those spots where just not too many people ever get to. And I just saw something out there. Where was that? Rock. I thought I saw a tin can out there. Wow, guys. All right, I see some ruins off there in the distance. They're only about a quarter of a mile away. Almost impossible to see from here when the sun goes behind the clouds. The sun's low enough in the sky, I don't know, it's probably about 5 in the afternoon. And when the sun peeked out, it shines on the side of those rocks that the ruins are made out of. There's an even bigger one back up there So we're gonna go check these out. It's gonna be a little bit of a walk, so I'm just gonna grab some basics to take along with me. Wow, this is pretty cool, guys. This was definitely a house. So let me grab the camera. I'm going to take you guys in. This was definitely a dwelling. We got a nice fireplace here. I can't believe how thick the walls on this thing are. Out here in this country where there's just no trees for a long ways, it's more typical to see these homesteads and things made out of stone. And this is pretty typical of that. It's stone construction with mud chinking in the cracks between the stone. Just pretty incredible that it's way out here in the middle of nowhere, but it is by this little tiny water source, and it's probably not a really reliable water source, but there is a little spring here. So it was probably just enough for them to subsist out here. They even had a mantle, so there's this board and that board that came out that are actually laid into the stonework. And there was probably another board that went across them, and this was the mantle. Pretty incredible, the tiny little things like that, the little touches that they would add, even way out here sometimes. Just those little creature comforts. After just another mile or two down the trail, I spotted another set of ruins off in the distance. So I decided to jump out of the Jeep and take a short walk to investigate. Alright, I got a little spot out of the wind. This is really neat to see these. This structure is quite a bit bigger than the other one. I'm running out of daylight, so I'm going to mark this on the map, call it another cool area. There's also lots of really neat places to camp around here, so this would be a great place to come back to. Wow, guys, I just stopped to get a snack, and this is absolutely breathtaking out here. It's just crazy. I can barely see the cut of the little canyon and all these hills with the sunlight right now. And man, this is just huge country, and what's always so amazing to me is how desolate it looks, but how much actual history and stuff there is here. Right from where I'm standing, I can see broken chunks of obsidian, worked pieces of obsidian up here. So this is an area where the natives actually gathered up here and did their tool making while they watched over this whole valley. They could see game moving for, well, really as far as the eye could pick it out. Wow, guys, it is just amazingly beautiful in here, and this is what happens to me all the time. Is it's 6:30 right now, and I'm probably nowhere near a place that I want to camp yet, but it's just so freaking beautiful in here. I just want to see what's over that next ridge and what's down in that next canyon. Right now, the one I'm in is this red rock, and then a little while ago I came through an area where the rock was like layers of basalt and white. It's just incredible in here. All right, it's not the most beautiful that I've ever had, but I think in the morning we are going to have an amazing view of the Steens Mountains out there. Hey, this is what I got to work with. Probably the first thing I'll do after I open this up is kind of sweep the back off. switched out some sleeping gear, so I've got my sleeping gear inside here. So I'll toss it up in my tent, and then actually at that point my bed's pretty much ready to go. Currently I'm running the Odyssey series hardshell rooftop tent from Free Spirit Recreation. I do have 4 gallons of fuel and a couple of max tracks on top of the rack on it, and it was fine. It was a little bit heavier opening up, but because it has those gas struts that assist the opening, it was still fine for me to push open and just leave that stuff up there. So this is the first time I've had that much stuff up there, so it's nice to know I can still deploy it. And these are the Front Runner Wolf packs, and I get them from Lolo Overland. They stack on top of each other and they lock together really securely, so that's one of the things I like about them is, and then I can also use them for, they make good end tables and additional tabletop space around camp. We definitely got a little bit of a storm coming in. I'm just going to use my Optimus Crux stove. All I'm going to do tonight is boil some water. Alright, I'm running out of light fast, so I am going to go ahead and set up my ready light here. This is literally like a 15-minute camp setup. This is what I do when I'm crunched up against light or weather issues or something like that. I just set up kind of this minimum camp like this, and then it's quick to pack up in the morning as well. All right, look at that. Man, this ready light, this actual ready light right here is one that I've had for almost 3 years now, and this thing just keeps on ticking. And man, I leave it out in the rain, the snow. I'm not recommending you guys do that with yours, but it's actually kind of gotten to be a thing with me. I'm just going to keep using this thing until it wears out. I've got a couple other brand new ones in my garage, but this one just won't quit. So solid piece of kit, the Ready Light from Free Spirit Recreation. Then it has 4 of these removable pod lights on it, and these are the lights that I take off and I use up in my tent. And then it has a built-in solar charger on the back, so in the morning I just leave it out in the sun and it charges itself back up. All right, you guys want to see a filthy trasharoo? That's the one thing about these, is they ride on the back of the rig, so they do get pretty darn dusty. And I always line mine with a really heavy-duty contractor bag, and then I carry a bunch of the extra contractor bags inside the lid, and they're kind of a dual purpose item to have around camp too. I'm trying a new Mountain House meal tonight. I've never had this flavor before. This is the yellow curry with chicken and rice, so hopefully it'll be good. They redesigned these Mountain House packages, and now they're shorter. So I think you can probably use a normal size spoon with them. Ooh, flavor's good on that. All right, turn that off. Then pro tip, set my Mountain House meal and the remainder of that bag of boiling water. That'll help keep it nice and hot while it rehydrates. Give that about 10 minutes and we'll have dinner. Boy, I tell you, that's one thing about the high desert is, man, when it cools off quick out here. I bet the temperature's dropped 10, 15 degrees just since it got dark and I'm here in camp. All right, let's see how this chicken curry is. Man, it smells amazing. I'm a big fan of Thai food. Okay, first bite. This is the Mountain House yellow curry with chicken and rice. I'd say that's very nice. Good, the curry flavor is really good. It's got a good, decent hit of coconut flavor in it. Now it's good, it has peas in it, carrots, reconstituted really well. The texture's good. Yeah, I think that's a winner. For my beverage of choice, I'm having a aloe vera mango drink, because nothing says manly drink like a aloe vera mango drink. During the day, mostly what I drink is water, so I actually really enjoy like something in the evenings that has some vitamins, that has some natural sugar in it. I'm not a drinker also, so it's just kind of nice to have something different, something that's got some flavor to it in the evenings. Nice pairing with my Mountain House meal. Well, I just looked at the clock, and it's actually pretty late. It's almost 10 o'clock. I just kind of sat and chilled a little bit after dinner. I am just going to get myself cleaned up, brush my teeth, wash up a little bit, and it's getting really chilly out here, so it'll actually be nice to crawl up in the rooftop tent and turn the heater on for a minute and get nice and warm before I fall asleep. So one thing I usually always do in the evenings is I do a little bit of map recon. So right now I'm on Gaia. I actually have really good cell phone reception right here. I have 4 bars of service and LTE, so I'm looking at the satellite imagery. And mainly what I'm looking for when I look ahead on my route is just any kind of points of interest off to the side of my route. A lot of times I find things that I missed when I set up the route, or I didn't see when I set up the route. Tomorrow we'll have lots of time. I want to cover some distance, but it's not such a huge amount of distance that we can't get through it in the day and get to camp with a good amount of time tomorrow evening. Morning, guys. Well, it's about 5:15 in the morning and making my morning brew. And what I like is a couple of packets of instant coffee inside a water bottle. I'm going to do 2 this morning because I didn't sleep that much last night. The truth is, I actually enjoy cold coffee. I like the kick of that nice bitter taste. So when you get some coffee in me, guys, get dressed, get out there, and then we'll get some breakfast. But man, it is going to be a beautiful, beautiful sunrise this morning, so we don't want to miss this. Wow, I am just surrounded by an incredible view out here. I've got the Pueblo Mountains over there. I've got the Steens Mountains up here. I've got Trout Creek Mountains down behind me. I'm out in the middle of this wide open plateau out here. But it is just gorgeous. The sun's starting to come up. This is just absolutely breathtaking out here, and there is nothing better in the world than waking up in a place like this. Just gonna get geared up here and start working on breakfast, but man, I just got to take a little bit, enjoy my morning coffee, and soak this up. Well, as beautiful as it is this morning, it sure is chilly out here. But man, you just can't wake up any better spot than this. Alright, so we're going to make a little southern inspired breakfast this morning. I'm going to have a little bit of sausage, eggs, and grits. So, got my water boiling. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make some savory grits. So I'm just going to do a dash of pink Himalayan sea salt. I don't need a lot. I'm going to go in with some black pepper, just a touch of garlic salt, and some butter. And that'll be pretty good for the grits. And then I'll cook up my sausage in the same pan that I do my sausage in. I'll cook up my eggs really quick, and I'll have a nice little southern inspired breakfast. Alright, so got my grits going here. I've got water in with my grits. I put all the spices with them, and I have them sitting in a bath of boiling water there, just so they keep hot and they keep kind of constituting or puffing up. I've got my sausage going here. As soon as my sausage is about done, I'll crack my eggs into this pan. By that time my grits should be done. I got a nice hot cup of coffee here. So I should have a good breakfast in no time. Bon appetit, guys. Breakfast is served. So this is just a nice hearty little breakfast. Something that I think a lot of people don't think about around here, but is a really good filler for breakfast is grits. Like, grits are great in the morning just with some honey and some butter and maybe a little bit of cream in them. That adds a little protein to them, and just that in and of itself can be a pretty hearty meal. You can make them more savory like this, where I mixed them with a little bit of salt, garlic salt, butter, black pepper, and then serve them up with the eggs and the sausage. It's a breakfast that takes about 10-15 minutes to make. Alright, I had a good breakfast, went for a little walk. Now I'm going to brush my teeth, start getting my camp buttoned up. Got all my dishes done already. So pretty soon I'll start throwing the gear in the rig and we'll hit the trail again and see what today brings. Alright, so real quick, I just moved my cooler over here to a place where it was going to be shady for a while I start buttoning up my camp. And as you guys can see on this trip, I'm just using, this is an Igloo cooler. It's not a really expensive fancy cooler and it's not that big. And this is a 4-day trip I'm on. So I can get away with a small cooler like this for a couple reasons. Number one, because I'm not bringing that much perishable food along on this trip. I do have some, but I'll use most of it up today, tonight, and tomorrow morning. But there's a couple of things that I do really religiously in order to get away with using a small, inexpensive cooler like this. Number one, I always make sure it's outside of my vehicle at night so it can absorb the maximum amount of the coldest part of the night air possible. And number two, my rule of thumb is I try to never let the sun hit it. And then just generally speaking, I try to keep it in cooler places inside my Jeep. I can even throw like coats over it or things like that to help insulate it a little bit. But at the end of the day, if I'm just kind of careful with it, I can get a cooler like this to hold ice for me for a couple of days. And so then the advantage for taking a small cooler like this is obviously it just takes up so much less space in my vehicle. And you know, with my normal Overland kit, it's not that bad, but you add drones and cameras and all of that stuff, and I'm pretty full in my rig, so anything I can do to save room in there is a big help. Alright, I pretty much got everything packed, so now I'm just going to put away the rooftop tent. And guys, this is so simple. Alright guys, we are packed up and rolling out of camp, and it is 9:15, perfect. Had a nice little morning walk, and now we got a lot of daylight to find some more adventures. Alright guys, we are on the trail. So we've got about, I'm saying somewhere in the ballpark of 25 miles or so to go to get to the area where the general vicinity of where I want to camp tonight. And depending on how bad the roads are, and depending on what kind of interesting stuff we see along the way, that could take us a good portion of the day. All right, well, the elevation got a little lower out here and I got into some of this alkali pan type area, so I wanted to jump out and do a quick little walk. And I did find some worked pieces of low-grade obsidian or basalt. So like a lot of these pans out here, the natives were out here maybe in a time when they were still had water on them, or maybe just passing through. But it's just amazing to come out into country like this that's so desolate and so remote and realize that for thousands of years, people have been somehow eking out a living out here. Yeah, it's very interesting. I find quite a few artifacts out here. So I could probably find a lot more if I wanted to burn some more time here, but I've still got some miles to cover today. The day's young, but I got a long ways to go, or could potentially be a long ways if the roads are bad. You know, one thing that's interesting is I found a couple of pieces of grinding stones, or like a metate or a mortar and pestle, a couple of pieces of things like that out here. And then just now, just off to my left back there, I see some camas just starting to sprout. So maybe what brought them out here is maybe there was some wild onion or some camas or something that grew out here. All right, I couldn't resist taking a little detour down here. I'm intrigued by these artifacts that I was finding on that last little walk. So there's this old road jetting off to the side down here. So I'm going to run down it just a little ways. In places it's almost just disappearing, but there's enough openings between the sagebrush and everything that I'm able to keep following it. But I'm just curious to see where it goes. So I'll take a little side trip and see how this works out. A ways further, that track finally faded into nothing and I came to the end of it. I decided to take advantage of the natural pause in my trip to take a walk out through that little area of the desert. It's interesting country with the baked flat alkali mud broken up by islands of brush. But it didn't take too long before I wanted to get back to the refuge of the air-conditioned Jeep again. The wind's just starting to pick up a little bit, which is actually nice because it's starting to get warm out here. Back in the comfort of the cab of my air-conditioned Jeep, I resumed my journey on towards that lake bed that I'd been waiting over 10 years to see again. Eventually, I got into some ancient sand dunes, which I knew at one time were the shoreline of that ancient lake. It was a little tricky picking my way through the dunes and trying to find the right track that would pop me out on the edge of the lake, but eventually I found it, and stretched out before me was that lake that I'd been waiting years to get back to. Alright, so I arrived at the lake quite a bit earlier than I thought I would. The road was actually pretty smooth getting here. So I'm just kind of driving around the perimeter of the lake right now, exploring a little bit. It's really windy outside, so I tried to get a little bit of video outside, but I don't think any of it's going to turn out. So I'll just tell you guys a little bit some of the things I found out there. So a lot of this country, way back around 1940, World War II time, they used as a bombing range. So they flew a lot of military practice and training flights across here. So I did actually find an old dummy bomb casing, or actually it may not have been a dummy. My guess is it's a dummy because it's still fairly intact, but a couple of pieces of metal laying around out there. Just really interesting kind of topography. I love these pans like this and around the edge of them. Of course, at one point they were lakes, so they were just a mecca for different types of activity over the years. So it's early enough in the day, it's 12:30, so I don't know if I'm actually going to end up camping here. I'm just going to continue working my way around the edge of it. It's a pretty big pan, so I'm going to kind of explore the whole thing and see what I see. If it looks like a cool place to camp, by the time I get all the way around it, I'll camp here. If not, there's another place on my list that I've been wanting to check out that's just up a little bit further to the north, maybe another 10 miles or so. So I might head up that direction and check it out. Alright guys, I'm hauling ass. I'm going right across the middle of this pan, and this is always a little bit sketchy because they can be soft. Even though it's bone dry on top,
There's nothing says that there can't be water right underneath the surface. So, but I'm following where this is where people have traveled across it before, and I'm keeping my speed at about 60 miles an hour. So keep your fingers crossed. Man, it is a couple miles across this too.
After doing quite a bit of exploring around that old lake bed and crossing the large pan, I still had quite a few hours of daylight left, so I decided to continue heading north along the next leg of my journey. I'd worked my way quite a ways off the beaten path during my exploring, so the first thing I needed to do was find my way back to a little more established trails that I could identify on my map. In almost no time at all, I was back on my pre-planned route, which brings me to a great place to conclude part 1 of this adventure. But the adventure will continue in part 2 with some more epic trails, amazing landscapes, awesome campsites, and the most incredible stone ruin that I found on the entire trip. I hope you guys enjoyed joining me for part 1 on the adventure, and I look forward to seeing you on part 2. As always, I appreciate your support, look forward to your comments and your questions, and can't wait to see you for the next adventure. Until then, Coyote Works, out.